So UFC 305 is on the horizon. We have Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya in the main event for that middleweight strap. And I'm going to break down who I think will win that matchup. Now, I'll say this first. Does Israel Adesanya deserve a title shot? No, but we're here now. He gets one. He's a UFC star boy. You know, I don't even mind this fight because there is a story behind it. We've seen Dricus call himself the real African champion, and we've seen Israel Adesanya not like that sort of language from Dricus Du Plessis. But you know, we're here now. This is a hyped up fight. They've had a stare off in the octagon where I think Israel Adesanya was a little bit drunk, but we're here now. And this fight is a banger fight, and I can't wait to watch it. But here is how I think it's going to play out. Now, can Israel Adesanya beat Dricus Du Plessis? That one, to me, is pretty much a given. I think we all can agree here that Adesanya has a very, very strong chance of beating him. But here's the deal. I don't think Adesanya is the best version of Adesanya that we're ever going to see. I think this current version of Adesanya is the worst he's ever been. And I think Dricus Du Plessis is a nightmare style matchup for Adesanya. And the reason that is because we've seen just in his recent fight between Adesanya and Strickland walk down Adesanya, avoid or defend his best shots. Pretty much Adesanya had nothing on the feet for Strickland. And when we watched Strickland versus Dricus, we saw that fight to be very competitive. And honestly, regardless of who you think won that fight, it was pretty evenly matched. So I think Dricus and Strickland have very similar styles, almost identical. I think that Dricus relies more on overhands and more of looping hooks. And I think he has better footwork than Strickland. But however, the style is very, very similar. So I think Dricus can carry that style against Adesanya. Now, we also know that Adesanya is a counterpuncher. Maybe he can be on the back foot against Dricus, and maybe he can find a shot that could KO Dricus out cold, because we have seen Dricus be put out cold in the past by Roberto Soldic and KSW. Now, I think that Dricus' chin is fine. I'm not really worried about his chin whatsoever. I don't think he's been hurt in the UFC so far, and he's fought some pretty powerful punchers. So if I'm being honest with you here, I don't really see a world where Adesanya KOs Dricus. The reason Adesanya was able to KO at Pereira was because Pereira thought he was hurt and he found a counter shot against the cage. I don't see Dricus being in that situation where if he does have Adesanya hurt against the cage, where he's just trying to tee off on him, I think he goes for a takedown in that moment. Could Adesanya find a counter left hook or a knee up the middle in that moment? For sure, but I just see Dricus going for a takedown if he does happen to have Adesanya against the fence in that situation. And that really could be the main reason why I think I am picking Dricus Du Plessis. I think just the grappling moments might be a little bit too much for Israel Adesanya. Adesanya hasn't really faced too many grapplers in the UFC. Obviously, he's tried to face guys, or obviously he has faced guys who have tried to take him down, but has he really fought a guy who can pressure him like a Strickland can while also shooting takedowns? When he fought Cannonier didn't really do much against him. Gastelum, he's short, he's small, didn't really try to do too many takedowns. When he did, it was at the dumbest time when he hurt Adesanya with a head kick and then goes for a stupid double leg. Marvin Vettori, he can grapple, but he has a very simple style with no footwork. I just think that some of these opponents that Adesanya has faced at middleweight just don't really have the skill level of a Dricus. And when fighters do mix in the takedowns against Adesanya, he seems to not really have that KO power anymore. I mean, never KO'd Vettori, but he has a great chin. Never KO'd Jared Cannonier. Decent chin, but not that great of a chin. We just saw him get put out by Nasruddin Imavov in their fight. He couldn't do anything to Blachowicz on the feet for the most part, but Blachowicz has a really strong striking game as well as a grappling game. You could say he was up a weight class, and that's why Yang was able to out-grapple him at moments in that fight. But overall, I just think that Adesanya just doesn't really have this one-punch KO power against guys who are willing to grapple with him. And yeah, in the past, he has found ways to KO some grapplers that he's fought, but those were always in the beginning of his UFC career. Those were very, I would say, subpar or low-level competition, like Rob Wilkinson. I know he's doing good in other promotions now, but at the time, not really that high level of a competition for him early in the UFC. When he finished Paulo Costa, Costa was only striking with Adesanya. When he finished Pereira, only striking as well. So it seems like he just doesn't really have that KO power against guys who will go out there and grapple with Adesanya. So I think it's pretty safe to say here that Adesanya, when he fights grapplers, does have a more difficult time than when he's not fighting a grappler. And I feel like the best argument for that is his rematch against Whitaker. Whitaker arguably won that fight by just using a jab when he had a significant less reach than Adesanya, but he also was at times grappling up Adesanya and getting the back, holding him there for a second. Whitaker overall just had a lot of success in the grappling against Adesanya. And I guess technically on paper, Adesanya won that fight, but I think that arguably he lost to Whitaker in the rematch. And if that's Whitaker and this is Dricus Du Plessis, I think it's a different ball game for Adesanya here. And I feel like when we look back at Adesanya's career, when it's all said and done, he might not have the best resume when we go back and look at it in hindsight. I mean, look at Vettori. Is Vettori really even that good? Kind of. He's kind of mid. When we look at Jared Cannonier, he was an old guy when he fought Adesanya. Romero fight was really, really bad and stinky. Lost to Blachowicz, lost to Pereira. That KO against Pereira revived his career, yes, but that was a really drained, nerfed version of Pereira that Adesanya fought. When he fought Kelvin Gastelum, is Kelvin Gastelum really even that good? We've seen him not have success at middleweight and not have too much success at welterweight as well. He was short. He was small for the division. Just really wasn't that good at all. Paulo Costa, that win isn't aging so well right now. I'm just looking at a lot of wins that Adesanya has in the UFC so far. I'm like, maybe those guys really weren't that good and they were just pretty much the next man up for Adesanya. And when I compare those fighters to Dricus, I think Dricus is just night and day better than those guys. And yes, I know he's unorthodox. I know he throws weird strikes. It doesn't look the prettiest when we watch Dricus fight, but I think he is night and day just better than those guys. He fought in the UFC, coming into the UFC, he fought with a pretty much messed up nose. We didn't really know how good his cardio was. Gets his nose fixed. He fights Sean Strickland and he looks amazing. He fights Whitaker and he just steamrolls through him. Like Dricus is, I think, at a different level now than some of the middleweights that Adesanya has fought in the past. And I think this whole style that he's going to bring to this fight versus Dricus is just not going to be effective. What's Adesanya going to realistically do? He's going to get on the back foot. We're going to see Dricus pressure him. He's going to try to land low kicks, a lot of low kicks, body kicks, just overall use his kicks, try to land counter punches. And I think we're going to see Dricus find ways to maneuver around that with his footwork. We're going to see Dricus land probably big overhands, have a nice jab. Like, I really think that Dricus is going to come into this fight looking the best he's ever looked. And we're going to see a really dumbed down, watered down. We're going to see the same version of Adesanya that fought Sean Strickland. And honestly, we might even see a worse version of Adesanya that fought Sean Strickland because Adesanya has had some time off. I remember seeing a video months and months ago when after he fought Strickland, he looked kind of fat. I mean, I think he'll be in shape for this one, but I don't think Adesanya is going to be fully invested into MMA or fully invested like how he was when he was champion. I mean, the man got a DUI shortly after he lost to Strickland. Like, I don't really find Adesanya to be just fully like himself for this fight for Dricus. I think that this is not a prime version of Adesanya anymore. He's getting up there in age. I believe he is 34. I take that back. He's 35. This just isn't the same Adesanya that he was 4 or 5 years ago when he was fighting Anderson Silva. And if emotions are hot and if Adesanya is really angry at Dricus and he wants to go after him, I just see a lot of pressure on Adesanya in this fight. And I don't think he has enough of time to live up to it. And what I mean by time is that, again, he's aging. He's been off for quite some time now. I don't think this version of Adesanya and the style matchup that is Dricus Du Plessis is really effective enough or just overall good enough for him to win. I just don't think Adesanya is good enough anymore. That might upset some people, but I think Dricus overall is going to go out there and possibly make a statement on Adesanya. Do I think he finishes him? I don't know, but I am leaning towards the finish for Dricus Du Plessis. I think he really is that good. Now, I know people are saying, oh, Adesanya, he won so many fights when he was a middleweight champ. Adesanya, this is just simply a different version. Because you remember what Adesanya was back then, doesn't mean he's the same thing now. And arguably back then, he wasn't really that good in the first place. So don't pick Adesanya based on popularity. Don't pick Adesanya based on his name value. Look at this fight objectively and just look at the style between Adesanya and Dricus. And I know Dricus' style looks ugly, but trust me, it works. We've seen it work in the UFC. He's goddamn middleweight champion. His style is good. I don't care how ugly it looks. It works. It worked against Strickland. It worked against Whitaker. It's worked against top tier middleweights in the UFC. He comes out of a very, very good gym, or they do hyper-analyze ways to beat opponents. He's not fighting out of some just random ass gym in South Africa. He's fighting actually out of a very educated gym with educated coaches. And honestly, some gyms don't really have that. I see a lot of fighters going to fights and not have the best game plan or best fight IQ, but I think the gym that he trains at, can really provide that for him. I really do trust a lot in Dricus Du Plessis' coaches. Just when it comes to this fight, I'm just really worried about Adesanya's style and how it's going to clash versus Dricus. I don't think we're going to see Adesanya be able to do what he normally does to opponents, like when he fought Cannonier, like just using his low kick effectively, using his jab at range. His jab is pretty mid in my opinion, but he can use a jab. He's going to try to counter shot Dricus, but I don't think he'll be too effective. I don't see him, again, chinning Dricus at all. I think his chin is solid enough to handle the power of Adesanya if he has any power. Again, I'm on boob watch this week, so if Adesanya's tit is massive for this fight, then maybe he does one punch KO Dricus out cold. But if he does have a normal sized chest for this fight, I don't see him finding a way to KO Dricus out cold. Also, this fight is in Perth, Australia. I don't think Australians are biased towards rooting for New Zealanders. Maybe not so much for South Africans either, but I do think if the crowd was going to have to pick somebody to root for, it might be Dricus Du Plessis. It could be Adesanya as well. I don't know how they're going to really root for either fighter. But the last time we saw Adesanya fight in Australia, it was versus Strickland, and the whole crowd was rooting for Strickland. Now, that could just be the Strickland effect, but maybe it could be the same thing for Dricus. So this being in Australia, I don't really see Adesanya having really any hometown advantage or any crowd advantage like how a Volkanovski did against Islam when they fought for the first time. So when I break this fight down, stature by stature, style by style, Dricus isn't really too much smaller height-wise than Adesanya. I think he's like barely smaller than him by just a little bit. It's not like he's fighting a Kelvin Gastelum who is a lot shorter than him. The reach isn't too much far apart as well. Adesanya does have a 4-inch reach advantage, which is a good advantage to have over Dricus, but I don't think it's the craziest reach advantage we've seen from Adesanya in his career out of all of his fights that he's had in the UFC. I think it's going to be more competitive than what people think when it comes to Adesanya versus Dricus. And I think Dricus is going to be able to pull this one out just by, again, doing the Sean Strickland thing, pressuring him back, landing bigger shots than what Strickland landed. If Sean Strickland can drop Adesanya, I think Dricus can as well. I think Dricus has way more power than what Strickland had. And we've seen Dricus one punch KO people out cold in the UFC. We don't really see that too often from Strickland. We see him maybe get a TKO, maybe hurt somebody and then finish him, but not putting guys out with one punch out cold completely. So to really dumb this down, I think Dricus has the power advantage. I think he has the grappling advantage. I think he has the style advantage on the feet in terms of pressuring him backwards. I think overall, Dricus just has a lot of pluses in this fight, and I think Adesanya has way too many minuses for me to end up picking him. So I'm taking Dricus Du Plessis. I'll take him by decision. I think at some points he does drop Adesanya and possibly hurt him. Adesanya will have some success, and if Joe Rogan's working the commentary booth for this fight, we're going to be hearing a lot of, oh, I think Dricus's calf is done a ton of times, but don't worry. I think Dricus will be fine dealing with the low kicks. I don't think he's going to have a dead leg by the first round, but I think as soon as Dricus establishes that he can grapple Adesanya, I think it's his fight from there on out. Whether he grapples in the first round, the second round, the third round, I think as soon as he grapples in one of those 3 rounds, I think the fight's his. So again, can Adesanya win this fight? For sure. Maybe he can find that one lucky punch to put out Dricus. Maybe he can outclass him for 5 rounds. That is possible. Will I bet on that? No. But do I think Dricus will win this fight? Yes, I'm taking him to beat Israel Adesanya. I think the style is just too much. I think the activity is just too much. I think his grappling and his power will be too much for an inactive Adesanya. I think he'll win this by decision. So finally, my official prediction for this fight is I'm taking Dricus Du Plessis to defeat Israel Adesanya by decision. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, give me a sub, hit the bell icon for notifications as well. Leave a comment down below. I like reading your guys' comments if you do disagree. But I'm out of here, guys.